This movie shows a standard demo with DDM and IronCAD. So first of all, we log into DDM, and each user in the system has a unique username and password, which is their electronic signature into the system. So we log in, and the main DDM User Interface opens. So if I just run a search for documents and models in DDM, then we get a number of items returned, and we have a mixture of documents, parts, drawings and assemblies. So what we need is some means of filtering this information so that we can quickly search and find things that we want to work on in DDM. So if I search for items that include the term housing, then my search results are narrowed down to 13 items. And I can extend this search. For example, I can say show me just released items, and then my search results are narrowed down to just 8. So if I remove the term released, we'll just notice a few other things in the user interface. First of all, we have 2 items here, issue 1 of the item, and it's been modified at some point, and we also have issue 2 of the item. And if we look at the life cycle state of the items, we can see that issue 1 has now been superseded, and issue 2 is the official release version of this item. We also have items that are work in progress, and these are items that haven't yet been completed. There is a user still working on these items, and they've not yet been approved and released. So we have other methods of searching in DDM. The first really useful item is My Recent Items, which shows us a list of things that we've recently worked on. The most recently worked on item will always be at the top of the list. We also have a category browser that allows us to categorize items that we store to DDM that make them easy to find, and that's really important when we're creating new designs and we want to reuse items. So we can start to create categories of items that we use regularly in our designs. So for example, we might have fluid power components, and we select on this, which shows us all fluid power components, and then we might want to drill down to just find push-in fittings, and this narrows our results down to push-in fittings. When we're setting up searches in the system, there are probably things that we will search for regularly, and we can use favorites to save our favorite searches so that we can find them quickly. So if I'm working on a project, then I can quickly find the items related to that project. Okay. So we're going to create a new item. So I'm going to open IronCAD. And then we're going to create a new part in IronCAD and save it to DDM. So existing users of IronCAD will see some differences in the user interface. We have a new ribbon menu that allows us to communicate between IronCAD and DDM. So from the Start menu, we have a PDM Integrator menu that allows us to access the commands between IronCAD and DDM. And these can be moved to the Quick Access toolbar. So we can say Add to the Quick Access toolbar. And here I've added my Search and Open button that allows me to quickly jump into DDM to find an item to load or to refer to something that's already stored. But if I create a new item, so we're going to create a new scene in IronCAD, then under add-ins, we have our IronCAD PDM Integrator menu. And the commands that I use most frequently I've added to my quick access toolbar. So we're going to create a new design. Just going to create a shaft, 80 long, and let's open the part properties, and we're going to call this a shaft, and this is going to be hollow eventually, so it's shaft hollow. I'm also going to define its material, so this is 1060 alloy. Let's just change its color. Okay, so we've created our solid shaft initially, and we're going to save that to DDM, and then we'll modify it and save the hollow shaft. So here I have my save icon, which is also here, so we should always be using the DDM save and not the traditional IronCAD save. We want to save this model back to DDM. First of all, a local copy of the file is created on the user's machine, and it uses the default IronCAD name, scene 1 in this case. Then our DDM properties window opens, and you'll see that shaft hollow has been transferred to the description of the item in DDM, but what we're going to use is DDM's built-in automatic numbering system to allocate a part number to this part. So we select generate number, and then we select from our list of available numbering types. I'm going to select miscellaneous components, so we take out the new number from the system. Click on OK, click on OK, and our part is stored to DDM. This Save Progress window just confirms that the part has been correctly saved. And if we return to DDM, if we have a look at my recent items, then here's the part that we've created at a work in progress state, and that I have reserved, so only I can modify it, listed at the top of my recent items, and down here we see a thumbnail preview of the item that we've created. So when we create something, we have it reserved, and that's actually reserved to something that we call my workbench, a little bit like bringing a document or a model to your desk. So if I have a look at my workbench, I can see that I have this item. You can see the padlock. I have this item reserved to my workbench. If I have a look at the properties of the item, then we can see who created it, when it was created, when it was last modified. And we can see the preview that was taken when it was created. And you'll see that we've also created an automatic link to a data sheet, because we've made a match with a document in DDM that has the name 1060 alloy, which matches the material name that we used in creating our part. We can automatically attach data sheets that give us information about the material that's being used in the part, which is quite a useful feature. So here's the data sheet opened. Okay. So if we close DDM and return to IronCAD, you can see that we can view the properties of this item also from IronCAD. So we have a properties button here, and it allows us to view and modify the properties of this item in DDM. So we'll close that, and we're going to make a change to our shaft. So let's now make it hollow. We'll just make it 5 millimeters diameter, and we're going to extend that through the part. Okay, so the part's now modified, and we can save that back to DDM, and we get confirmation that our part has been saved. So one other thing we can do with the attributes is, if we open the DDM properties of the item, here we can find the color, and we're going to say this is dark grey. So we modify the color attribute in DDM, click on OK, and if we look at the properties of the IronCAD item, first of all we notice that the part number has transferred from DDM to IronCAD. But if we look at the custom properties of this item, you'll see that when we modify the properties in the DDM window, these are automatically synchronized and updated with the attributes and properties of the item in IronCAD. So I'm going to close this, and we're going to return to DDM and start to look at how we can work within project teams in DDM. So far the item that I've created has been reserved to my workbench, but now we want to reserve items into a project folder where a project team can interact on a design, so we can have collaborative working. So down here I have a number of sample projects that are set up in my system. So I select on projects, run a search, and here we can see the projects already set up in the system, or some active projects, some that have been proposed and one that's been closed. And in the same way that we're searching for parts, we can search for projects in the system. So if I search for projects that include the term IC, then we get a number of items returned. If I just want the IC conveyor, then that narrows the results down a little bit further. Okay, so if we look in this folder, we can see all of the documentation related to the project, and this includes models and drawings. It includes project control information, so project definitions, design reviews, project specification, and supporting documentation. And these dividers that we call them inside the project can be configured to suit the way that you work. These are just suggested examples. So what I want to do is to create a new folder so that we can start working in a new folder. So I right click and select new, and my project folder window opens. This allows me to create a new project. So again, I'm going to use automatic numbering to take out the next project number, and this is my IronCAD demo project, and we can copy that into comments for video. Against projects, we can have any number of different attributes relating to that project. So over on the right here, we can see that we have the state of the project, who owns it, the owning group. And I've set up a new attribute here that defines the type of project that we're creating. And when we get hundreds of projects in the system, this can be useful for filtering our search results to find the information that we want. So I have some examples in here, and let's say that this is a brand new project that we're working on. Once we've filled in the information, we click on OK to create the new project folder, and it asks us if we want this to be set as our current working folder. In other words, when we create new items, do we want them to be saved to our workbench or into the project folder? So now I'm going to be working on this project. I want to say yes, I want this to be my working folder. So I'm just going to minimize that for a moment, because what I want to do is to start by creating a project specification. So I'm going to look in my favorites area, and here I have document templates set up so that all of the users in the system can access the same document templates and start to create documents from the same set of templates. And in this case, I'm going to open and use the project specification template. So I double click to open that. And my new document opens, and I can add this in. So the customer contact, project title, date, etc., and we can continue and create our project specification. Once we've completed and filled in the information, we select to save this, and then we're prompted to save this back to DDM. So I can't overwrite the document template, so I'm going to use the save as function to save this document to DDM. So I'm going to select general documents, and this is my IronCAD demo specification. And while I'm saving that, I'm also going to categorize this. So if you remember, we had our category browser down here. I have a category set up for project specifications. So I select my category browser, come into Documents, and select Project Specification. So I've now created my new project specification, and if I open my project folder, we can see the document has been added into the project folder. So I'm going to move this into my project specification divider, and as I've completed this, I'm going to release this document. So this is my official project specification. What we can also do at this stage is to create a new search, a new favorite for this project, so that we can quickly find items in the project later on. So I select my folder type, and the name is Project 1011. Run a search. Here's the document currently in the project folder, and we say favorites, add to favorites, and this is PX 1011, and it goes into my projects. Click add, and now if I look in my favorites, my projects, I've got my new project search, so I can quickly switch between two different projects to find the information inside those projects. So we've now created our new project folder, and we're going to go back to IronCAD and create a new assembly. So we're going to start working in IronCAD and to create our assembly. So this is my first part. This is my bearing housing. Just put a bit of colour on that. Okay. And we're going to create a bearing to go into the bearing housing. Push that through the part, and again let's put some colour on that, and we'll define its properties. So this is bearing itself. We'll add the size, and we're also going to add to this a custom attribute, which is the part supplier, and in this case I'm going to add INA. So we add that in. Click on OK. So you'll see we're developing this design within one scene file, and we're not saving individual parts back to DDM at this point. And finally we'll create our shaft. And again, let's define its part properties, and this is shaft 15 diameter. Okay, now it's really important when working in IronCAD and DDM that if we create a scene file that's going to be an assembly, we need to define that as an IronCAD assembly. So we select to assemble those items together, and then let's just modify the assembly properties. This is my bearing assembly, and we'll add that into the description as well. Click on OK, and now we've defined our bearing assembly. So we're ready to save this back to DDM. Again, the same process as the first part that we created. This time we're going to allocate a concept number, because at this point we're not sure what the final part number of the design is going to be. So while we're just developing the design, we're just going to allocate a temporary number to it, and we save that back to DDM. And I can close this, and if we return to DDM and have a look, if we have a look at my recent items, then we can see the bearing assembly is at the top of my recent items list. You can see that it's work in progress, and we also can see that it's been reserved to the project folder. So you'll see that this is now defined as an assembly. The initial part that we saved was just a part record because there was only one component within the scene file. So if we jump back into our project folder, so I'm going to say my folders, which lists all of the folders I'm working on. Here's the project folder. I can open that up. Here's the bearing assembly that I've created, and I'll drop that into models and drawings. Okay. I can also say my working folder, which lists my current working folder, and I can identify and find the bearing assembly. So to load this into IronCAD, I simply double click, we get the load window open, click on OK, and my assembly is now opened into IronCAD. So let's assemble our parts together. So we select the bearing, turn on the tri-ball, and we'll just assemble this into the bearing housing. Let's do the shaft. So our design is complete, and we can again save this back to DDM. Now if we want to use some of these items in other designs, or if we want to create a DDM bill of materials from these items, what we want to do is to create these as individual scene files within this assembly so that they appear inside DDM as individual part records. And to do that, we select add-ins and we select export elements as scene files. And this shows all of the objects within the scene file that haven't yet been created as individual items. So I want to take all of these, so we say select all, click on OK, and DDM in the background will create an individual scene file of each of those items. We get confirmation that that's been completed, and you'll see the icon in the IronCAD scene browser has updated to indicate that a part record now exists for these items. So when we now save this back to DDM, we're prompted to create a new record for each of these items. So for my shaft, that's going to be miscellaneous component, and I'm going to allocate the category of shaft. And we just work our way through these items. So the bearing is also listed as miscellaneous and should also be categorized as a bearing. What you'll also notice is that where I set up my preferred supplier as INA, this has been now populated into the DDM attribute. Click on OK. And finally the bearing housing, and this is just a manufactured component. Click on OK. And my assembly is now saved back to DDM. So if we look at the properties of the assembly, if we look at the links tab, we can see the structure of the assembly that's been created. Okay, so I can close this for a moment. I'm going to return to DDM, and we're going to open our project folder. Let's just move those items into the models and drawings. Update my display so they're now displayed here. And what we're going to take a look at is bills of materials within DDM. So if I right click on this, I can open my bill of materials editor where I can see bill of materials information about this assembly that I'm creating. And we have a number of options within this. We can start to auto number it. So let's say auto number starting from 100. So we start to add bill of materials sequences to this so that we can alter the order of these if we like. You'll see our CAD quantity is the number of items transferred from the CAD system, and we could modify that if we want. So if we want to show more than one bearing, then we can right click on this, set it as manually managed, and then change the quantity and include things like spares quantities. What I actually want to do is to add some lubricant. I'm just going to minimize this for a moment. I'm going to return to DDM, and what I'm going to do is to create what we call a none drawn part record. So this is a part record that's not being created in the CAD system, but is something that we want to include on our bill of materials. So I right click on parts and say create me a new part. I'm going to allocate a number, and I'm going to give this a description, silicone lubricant, and we shall also categorize it at the same time. So we've created a new part record. So if I have a look at my recent items, here's my part record. You'll see this doesn't have an image file associated with it or a preview. So I'm actually going to add one. Let's open the properties of this. Actually, while I remember, I should also add a unit of measure to this. So this is milliliters. I come to the preview tab. What I can do is open up a directory here, and I can get an image either from the internet or from a digital camera and drop this into my preview tab, and there's the image of the lubricant that's been added. So I'll click on OK, just update my display, and there's the preview now down in the properties tab. What I also want to do is to add a data sheet to this lubricant so that people understand the properties of the lubricant. And so again, I'm going to return to the file system, and here I have a data sheet, a PDF data sheet that I've downloaded from the internet, and I simply drag that into DDM. This opens an import window summarizing the documents that we're about to import. And what I want to do is just to modify the properties of that before I complete the import. So I'm going to give the document a number, and this is my silicone lubricant datasheet. And in the same way as I've done previously, I can also categorize that. So I have a category for datasheets. Select that, click on OK. Let's complete the import. And my document is added to DDM. If we have a look here, here's the datasheet, here's the part record itself. Let's link those together. So I'm going to open the properties of the part record, and I'm going to drag this document and create a link, a relationship between the part record, my lubricant, and the datasheet itself, so that people can now immediately view the properties of the lubricant that they're using in their designs. Okay, so I now want to add this lubricant to my bill of materials. So if I just minimize this window a little bit, reopen my bill of materials window, then I can drag the lubricant to my bill of materials, and you'll see my lubricant has been added. Let's add this into the sequence. So I can click here and say this is 130, and I need to give a quantity. So I select my quantity here, which is 15 milliliters, and I can add some notes, bill of materials notes. Apply to bearing. There we go, and my bill of materials is now complete. I select apply, click on OK, and my bill of materials has been updated. See, we have certain reports within DDM, and so we can say, show me the bill of materials of this assembly, multi-level bill of materials, and this will open a reporting application to show me the bill of materials of this assembly. Okay, there's my bill of materials with my notes and my lubricant added. Alright, so what I do want to do is just to release this lubricant. So this is lubricant that people can use in their design, so we're going to release this. You'll see it picks up the datasheet, so we're going to release both at the same time. Let's set that as released, click on OK, and our lubricant and datasheet are now released. So we're going to load our assembly, and we're going to give it an official number, or an official assembly number, and we're also going to create a drawing of it. So let's load it into IronCAD. If we open the properties of this, you'll see we can alter the part number. So we're going to now generate a proper number for this assembly. Click on OK. And then we're going to create a drawing of the assembly. We have a DDM drawing frame set up that allows the attributes in the drawing title block to be updated automatically, and we're going to add some views to this drawing. So we drop that on there. You see in the drawing environment we have our PDM integrator ribbon, and in this case I'm going to use the quick access save that I've added to save our drawing back to DDM. And as it saves, you'll see the drawing title block updates with the description, person that created it, the drawing number and issue. Okay, so we can return to DDM. We can go to our project folder, my working folder. So open that, and we're just going to add these items now into our models and drawings for this project. And we're going to complete this by right-clicking on the top-level assembly drawing and selecting the Release Manager. Now what we need to do before releasing is to make sure that all subcomponents are released before we release the assembly. So I'm going to use Ctrl-A to select everything, and we're going to release the whole assembly in one go. And we're going to add some notes. Ready for production. Click on OK, and our project is now complete and has been released. So what we're going to take a look at now is how we manage change orders in DDM, and there are different ways of doing this, but we're going to have a look at using the workflow tools in DDM to prepare our engineering change orders. So if I select on this folder type here, I can view my engineering change orders currently in the system. And in my system, I've got 19 of them. It may be after a few years, we might have many thousands of engineering change orders. And we need some way of filtering these change orders so we can see which ones are active. So in the same way that we were looking at before, I can just say, well, show me which ones are active, and you'll see that we have 5 engineering change orders that are currently active. If we double click and open these folders, we can see information about the change order and what the change request is, and in the folder itself we would see the documents relating to the change. And you'll see we also have a graphical workflow that we will look at in more details in a moment that shows us where we are in this process. So it's a very good management tool for having an overview of which engineering change orders are in process, and if they are in process, at what stage in the process have they reached. So let's create a new one to modify the assembly that we've been working on. So I right click on my engineering change order folder type, and we create a new folder, and this is ECO folders, and it takes out the next number, and this is our description of the change request. So this is a full description. Here we have a short description that will be transferred to the drawing title block. So I'm just going to add here, and these can be modified later. So I say hollow shaft substituted, and this has come from the sales department, the change reason. We'll just say cost reduction here. And again, I've got an attribute here, which models are affected. So if this part is used on a number of models, then I can add, if I want, the model numbers again, so that I can search through my engineering change orders to see engineering change orders related to specific models. Click on OK, and it says, do you want the new folder to be set as your current working folder? In this case, I'm going to say no. And I'm just going to minimize that, and I'm going to go back to my working folder, which is the project folder. I'm going to reserve into that folder the bearing assembly drawing and the bearing assembly itself, and because those are the items that are going to be that are proposed to be changed by this change order. If I right click on these, you can see I have a reserve to folder option available to me. Once this opens, I can now find the engineering change order folder that I'm looking at. So hollow shaft substituted. Click on OK. And if I look in the change order folder, here's the change order request. So I add these into the change request. And what I'm going to do now is to send this into my engineering change order workflow. So I say send folder to, and I have two options to choose from. I'm going to use the second option, and I can add some notes in here. Change request, please review and accept, reject changes. Click on OK, and now my folder has been attached to a workflow, and my workflow looks like this. Just make it a little bit smaller so that we can see it. So we're at this step in the process, and we can see the process mapped out for us. First thing to notice is that as I've pushed these things into the workflow, the two items have changed state from release to under review, which is really important for people in the organization to understand when items are being considered for change. So we shouldn't order new tooling for production of an item if we notice that it's been set at an under review status. We should find out what the change is before we commit money to either making more or making tooling of a part. So at this point I can submit it for approval. I can send it back to the person that proposed it saying you haven't provided enough detail, or I could send it to another team who would conduct an impact assessment to see different items about this change request. How is the cost impacted? Is it the right thing to do for the company? So once we've gathered all of that information, we move it forward to the approval step. And here I'm going to select between two different groups of users. So depending on the nature of the change, or depending on the value of the change, I might need to submit it to a different group of people. In this case, I'm going to select the mechanical approvers, and I will again say, please consider this change request. And so my change request is sent out, and it steps forward to the next step in the process. So I'm going to close this window for a minute, and if I look at the engineering change orders, this time let's just say proposed, then I can see the proposed orders, and you can see I can set these up again as favorites. So these are the change orders that are proposed. These are change orders that I've raised, and here's the one that we're looking at. If we right click on this, we can have a look at decision makers, and this is waiting for a decision to be made by the engineering manager and the senior engineer. So having moved forward to the approval step in the workflow, it's now waiting for these users to give their approvals. These users will receive an email notifying them that there is an action required. So if we have a look as the senior engineer, here's the email that the senior engineer has received. Please consider this change request. Now if this user is not on site, it's possible that this user can log in using a smartphone, so he will see the email and can log into a web browser on the smartphone, so that they can complete their tasks without needing to be on site. So log in as the senior engineer. Here's the action request. Please consider this change request, so we can view the contents. We can view the drawing, understand the nature of the change that's being requested, and then we can approve or reject. So we're going to approve this. Yes, looks good to me. Go ahead. And we confirm the change. Now the senior engineer's action has been completed. It's now waiting for the engineering manager to complete his action. So I'm just going to close that window. We'll minimize this. We can close this. So you see the engineering manager has also received a request. But if we return to DDM, we have a section here for my workflow tasks. If I click on my workflow tasks, it will show me any workflows that are at a decision step that are waiting my action. But we can also set up deputies, so if the engineering manager is away on vacation and can't complete his action, we can set up a user as a deputy for that user. And I'm set as a deputy for the engineering manager. So if I look at my deputy tasks, I can see this request and I can open this folder. I can have a look in the audit trail, and I can see that the senior engineer has also completed his action. I can see that from the main folder as well. So if I say decision makers, I can see that the senior engineer has approved. So I can complete my action by saying send to approve, action performed as a deputy on behalf of the engineering manager. I agree to this. Click on OK. And that's now removed from my list of waiting actions. Let's have a look at my folders. Here's the engineering change order. If we have a look at the graphical workflow, you'll see it's now been set to the assigned step. So steps that have been visited are outlined in blue. Our current step is highlighted in green. And so we're just going to push this forward quickly. So at this point, a department manager is going to send it to one of his engineers to work on. I'm going to send it to myself. Please do this. And now I will receive an email notifying me that this task is waiting for me to complete it. So I'm going to set this as my current working folder. I'm going to open the assembly into IronCAD, and I'm going to make my change. So I'm going to delete the old shaft. Let's just delete. And we're going to load subpart. We're going to load a part from DDM. If we have a look at my recent items, we have a look for hollow shaft. Here's the hollow shaft that we created earlier, and we can load this into our design, and we'll just position it. Same as before, and our assembly has been updated. What we're also going to do is to use a handy command here to say load related drawing. So that's going to pull the drawing out of DDM, and we're going to update it so we can now see that we have the hollow shaft in session. I can't save this because the existing drawing is a release drawing, and you'll see that this is saying modified but unable to save. So what we're going to do is to create a new issue. So save new issue. We select both the bearing assembly and the drawing. We say go to the next issue. Change reason is automatically populated for us from the engineering change order folder. Click on OK. Click on OK again. Just wait for the action to complete, so the save to complete, which we've now had. And you'll see our drawing, the revision history on our drawing title block has been updated with the change, who made it, when it was made, and the engineering change order number. So we can close this information now. We can close this. We can return to DDM. We can have a look at my folders. Let's find the engineering change order folder. These are the items that we've updated, issue 2. Drag them into the change order folder, work in progress. We've completed our work, so we can send it to someone to check. Please check and release. Now within the workflow, we can automatically release these items. So as the user at this step, I will check and make sure that the changes have been completed correctly, and then when I send it forward to publish it, I'll just say released, and you'll see that the items have been automatically released within the folder. If we have a look at the change request, we can see that these items are now superseded. So my change request, my change order workflow has been completed, and I have a full audit trail for quality compliance for purposes to show me who's done what when, and that all of our quality standards have been met. So that concludes my engineering change order and how we process things through workflows. Final thing we're just going to take a look at is Ddm Web. So as a user within the organization or external to the organization, we can log into DDM through the web client, which gives us the ability to view information in the database. So if I log in as myself, I can view the contents, or I can search for items in DDM. So if I search for hollow, then you can see that it finds the hollow shaft that I created at the start of this session. If we look at folders, we can search for our engineering change order folders. If we know the change order number, we can search specifically by that, but in this case I'm just going to search for all folders, and we're going to go to the folder that we created, the hollow shaft engineering change order folder, which opens, and here we can see all of the documents related to that engineering change order. And if we want, we can select the issued shaft record, the drawing, and we can view a preview of the drawing, so we can open the PDF from DDM and view the information on the drawing. So this concludes the DDM for IronCAD demonstration. There are other features that can be shown, such as the Enterprise Update Manager. We can show more information on document management, how we manage emails within DDM, and we could also, if we want, show how we can use supplier folders to provide information to suppliers. So there are many features that can be shown, but this is the basic demonstration, and by talking to the prospect that we're visiting, we can understand their requirements and maybe modify the demonstration to show different features of DDM depending on what their needs are.